Nathan Reynolds, Snatched from the Flames.com. Nathan, how are you today? Good to see you.
David, how are you guys? It sounds like something's been going on the last half hour I missed, but man.
We've been having a nutrition conversation, but one of the things the previous medical doctor was talking about is proper nutrition, which he has in this great product here called New Eden. But he also mentioned, people in what they call blue zones who live to be longer and healthier because of their diets, and they're eating better than we are here in this country for the most part. And I'm sure you would concur. And that's why you kind of like teach proper gardening and proper farming and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a smooth transition into what you do.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. You also mentioned something that I don't know, for those that didn't catch it. You said you walk 6 miles a day. Is that right?
6 miles a day, every morning. Before,
wow.
I mean, I'm up at 6, and before this show starts, I've got 6 miles in, and not too bad. Not too bad.
Wow. That's incredible. You know, we're living in an area where we get to see a lot of city folk right now, and we live all over the place. We've traveled 150,000 miles over the last few years in an RV, but we are stationary right now, and so we're kind of in a neighborhood, and we get to see the walkers. You know what I'm talking about? Those neighborhood regulars that are out there on a consistent basis. And you know what? We have noticed some very stark contrasting differences of intellect when you talk to the people that are out walking and outside on a regular basis versus those that are not. And it is so noticeable. And because when you spend a lot of time out in more a rural area or different, especially like we lived on farms predominantly, small farms, homesteads, that kind of size stuff, not big ag style things.
Right.
The intellect as a baseline is so noticeably different when you have people that are eating differently. Just the single biggest contributor to those two things is being outside and eating above anything else that we have seen make a biggest difference. So I applaud you that you are out on and walking around, David, at any level, whether it's on a treadmill or outside. It takes discipline to do anything like that on a regular basis.
I do it 5 days a week. I do take Saturdays and Sundays off, but I make sure that I get it in, and I love it. I mean, there's nothing like the endorphins, the pumped up feeling you get from the exercise. So I love
it. I'll tell you, one of the places where I saw a diet that was very contrasting and different to mine was in Afghanistan. And I went out there when I was about 19 years old, maybe just about 20 years old. And when I went over there, we stayed in Kabul, or an area outside of Kabul, and which is the capital city. And they had shepherds still. You ever seen like a real shepherd boy? You know, like it is a very noticeable difference to culture and to style, because the methodology that they have in raising their animals and livestock is not to just shove them in fencing all the time and barbed wire or electric fencing, but is you assign someone, and it generally was the youngest child in the family. The youngest child in the family had this responsibility of taking care of the family's wealth, because when your wealth multiplies, it's far more powerful and beneficial when your wealth can reproduce on its own. It's a really effective way to get some massive returns on investments. I'll tell you that much. And they had these little shepherd boys, generally like 9-year-olds, 8-year-olds, not teenagers by any stretch of the imaginations, boys that in our culture, we wouldn't trust them with a stick that's sharpened on one end of it. You know what I mean?
That's because we become overprotected. You know, we need to teach. You know what I think? This is going to sound crazy. You may disagree, but I remember when I was going to school, they actually had a gun class. They taught you how to shoot at a range.
What a life skill, David. What an actual life skill. You could potentially feed or protect your family and just enjoy a skill that requires discipline and training and an attention to detail. You know, I took, one of the, there's for what it's worth, the Boy Scouts are a saturated, infested Masonic version of culture now. But at the time when I took it, I'll tell you, they had archery. Some of my favorite entire merit badges were archery and rifle and shooting, like marksmanship. They taught the fundamentals of a skill to me that enabled me to be able to make a quick adaptation when I went into the United States military. Not everyone goes there, but you don't know where your child's going to end up throughout their life. Like learning how to drive a manual vehicle. One of the best skills my father ever taught me. Learning how to drive a manual vehicle. I have driven tractors and trucks and motorcycles and all kinds of vehicles that I needed to learn the mechanics of being able to shift something that's not automatically doing it for me.
Do you realize, Nathan, you know what's worse? Imagine within the next 10 or 15 years, if the globalists get what they want, nobody will be able to know how to drive an automatic because they're going to have the driverless electric cars, and you're not going to be driving at all. And then God forbid you need to get somewhere yourself. That's
well, and that's a way to limit access very quickly, because like, as we've even experienced with when some of these man-made disasters strike and fires burn down concrete and not trees, and all kinds of other just absolute targeted destruction takes place, they start to do this geofencing. Y'all familiar with this phrase?
Yes.
Where you can have drones where you're like, oh, great, I can go fly in there and be my own reporter and go ahead and verify for myself from a firsthand perspective what's actually going on inside there. And then they put these geofencing in to where it doesn't allow your drone to get into that area, that there's a software inside it that communicates with, agencies such as the FAA that doesn't allow them to cross certain lines. Well, the same types of geofencing are put into driverless car systems in order to keep them from going onto places that are restricted areas to them. And so that limit of access, like over in Ireland, we had very close friends of ours right during the calamities of COVID began to experience, I'm not allowed to go more than 5 kilometers outside of my door. And it was tied to their phones and it tracked them around. And to put, for an American to not be able to go more than 2.5 miles outside of your door, 3 miles from your door, is a totally different confinement, a prison cell, for lack of a better word. But having a type of skill set that you're able to utilize vehicles that are not like that is incredibly valuable. So like, even still to this day, why it's very important for me to try to raise my children knowing as wide of a range of skills in order to be sufficient on their own whenever that time does come. They need to be able to be self-sufficient. I had a book here that I had gotten at a thrift store. I always go to thrift stores, y'all. Some of my books I find are out of print. This one's called The Complete Book of Survival by Eddie McGee's. This is a real good, like, I like some of these older books that have been putting out, but this was actually put out in Great Britain. So it was like a real random happens chance, but it's got, nice quality diagrams and pictures that go through it, black and white. But this, nice. What this book did, finding food. See, these are like paramount life skills, y'all. Like I grew up in the White Mountains of Arizona, like next to a White Mountain Apache reservation, and in Flagstaff, Arizona. My whole life, I lived basically over 6,000 feet in elevation. So it inherently, just at a baseline, gave me a very different perspective on how the world was and how fit people needed to be. Otherwise, they died. So I grew up with a basic level of requiring survival skills because I used to go out and explore on the White Mountain Apache reservation for hours on end. And it taught me, paramount and chief among all of these circumstances, was learning how to find your way home. You need to be able to navigate. You need to be able to orient yourself and find your way to a given destination. And that single skill set, David, of any that has been taken out of us, is finding your way around without this dependency to a technological device. If somebody takes your phone from you when you're already at a destination, you're trapped for all intents and purposes, unless you're all... You are. And it doesn't take a lot. Something that I've experienced is this whole other world of espionage and counter-espionage that I went through. And when one of those things that would happen is someone would take over someone's phone and their GPS, and then you would change their map. And you would allow them to be brought to a destination that's not the one they're intending to. And you would be shocked how often people will drive somewhere that they're not supposed to go. If they've never been there before, they obviously don't know any better. But you can literally take them on a wild goose chase and make them chase their tail. And some of you have experienced this even on your own map system, Google Maps or Apple Maps, whatever you use. And it'll take you a random, ridiculous route, the most insane, frustrating thing ever. And you're like, why? It's that because we don't know any better, and because we have given ourselves over to a dependency on a technological device that can readily manipulate our entire life and experiences.
Nobody knows how to use a compass anymore. Good luck.
Absolutely. And a map, a physical map. Like one of my favorite things I do when I travel into a different area, like one of those little skill sets I picked up along the way, was to go to the welcome center. Like when you cross over a state border, when you cross over an area, they have these big welcome centers. And I would always go there because they have free maps.
Right.
They have free maps. And then they have basically a concierge, someone that will you can ask all kinds of questions about the people, the culture, the ideology, the best places to go, the worst places to go. You can really do a lot of what's called terrain mapping, a given area, before you go there without having to get on a computer and do everything else or look up addresses if you don't want to. They make physical printed maps of an area. One of my absolute favorites are truckers' atlases, trucker maps, because they will also show you the size of the road's capacity of taking a larger size vehicle or not. It'll show you the major highway, the arteries and the veins of a state or of a nation, and it gives you an insight into that area before you go into there. And you know what? That way you're not navigating blind, because if you just can imagine, some people have had to wake up in the morning after natural disasters. Like out in Colorado, we had these horrible wildfires that came in and began to just burn down on an incredible rapid basis. And there was one that took place outside of Colorado Springs a few years back, and it literally burned down towards the Air Force Academy. I mean, people that live in a city of 700,000 people, 800,000 people woke up to walls of fire and cloud that went up like Hiroshima style, massive, 40, 50,000 foot plumes of smoke going into the air. And I got to see, I drove from Denver, Colorado that time down there at a very high rate of speed, because my family had a house that was in the mountains. And when I was on my way back there, they began trying to shut down roadways. And if you are not a local of that area, I learned at that time growing up, I drove by maps. I was a professional driver, delivery driver, and like protective asset driver for a lot of years. And I navigated by maps, because I learned that hackable technology stuff can cause you a big problem, especially when your job is getting your high value target from point A to point B safely. And so when I ended up going in there, the sheriff's department had begun shutting down all those major arteries, but I was able to navigate through back roads because of my familiar knowledge of the area. But otherwise, you have no way of getting in and out of these areas, and they can become kill zones. And I'm not just saying that as some kind of like potential. You can literally in the mountains in particular, if you've never been in a wildfire, you can have winds that are like tornado speeds, like an F3 tornado come barreling down and bringing fire and raining down molten materials, stuff raining out of the sky. So I began to drive into a city, Colorado Springs, this area called Garden of the Gods. There was literally ash raining down out of the sky so thick you couldn't hardly see, and it was lighting windshield wipers on fire. It was lighting people's windshield wipers on fire. And people go into these trauma states. When they go through that, they go into shock, and they're going to revert back to whatever level of real discipline, regular training they've ever had to encounter this situation. And most people have never had in their mind an option for how to deal with a life-threatening emergency situation of fire, not just like your house on fire. I mean, we used to do fire drills. Did you guys ever do fire drills, Penny and David?
We had, when I was going to school, man, you never knew they were going to come. That big alarm would go off. Everybody started, had a single file, We do them. I do them at our home once in a blue moon. We tried that, but
yes. Well, my dad was a volunteer firefighter, and so he used to do fire drills in our house. And I remember total darkness, total like smoke alarms going off. He would go in and make the smoke alarms go off and teach us to get out of a building like that, how to find or search for somebody else that's in a building when you can't see. Just blindfolding someone and having them crawl around their house and putting a bunch of stuff in their way that's not supposed to be there. Trying to teach people like you should train for this stuff before it's go time. This is like the fundamental desire that I just would like to communicate today. Train for something before you have to do the thing. Much as like we want to talk about survival and having your bug out bag and having your, your fire starter and your bivouac sacks and all these, your firearms or whatever it is, you got to use this stuff. If you don't know how to use it, the first time to try to familiarize yourself is never going to happen when you're in a total panic flight mode or a fight mode and a freeze mode. When you are in that like pure baseline, I just need to stay alive right now, you are not capable of thinking how to use a compass and a map when you've never done it in your life. I know you think you'll be able to, but you won't. And because of that, it's going to slow you down. And in Colorado Springs, what happened is that fire began to come down the front range of the mountains. In Colorado Springs, the almost everybody in the population lives directly at the base of the foothills of the mountains. They start out at literal 14,000 foot mountains. They go from about 5,000 feet to 14,000 feet instantly. It's an incredible vertical gain right there. And so everybody lives at the front range of that. Well, those people began to see these flames coming down them. And then this was as they're trying to drive and get around. So people started running back to their apartments and their houses, townhouses, because they got evacuation orders and they had to immediately leave. They gave people 30 minutes notice. As these people are back there, my sister had an apartment down there at the time, and I pull into their neighborhood and people are trying to load TVs into their cars. Okay. Big flat screen TVs into their cars. And I just sat there and observed people, because it's rare that you get an opportunity to really see what the end of the world as we know it looks like in reality.
Yeah.
When you see people get in this state of mind, what happens is they revert down to this very base level of reactionary living. They're The critical thinking has shut down. They have left the building. Their mind has left the building. And what they're going to grab is whatever is to them most important. So there was a neighbor right next door to my sister who was asking me, will you please help us load this TV? And it was a huge flat screen to where they had to lay their seats of their car
They were
down
asking you
in order
to
to
help
fit
them
that flat
do
screen
it?
in. Oh yeah. Because it's like moving day. You got to remember, if you've ever moved before, people that took the time to, like, what was most precious to them when they were moving, that's all that comes to mind. And so my sister, so I had to help these people move their TV back into their car while flames are coming down the mountain. Okay.
Right.
And my sister, I go inside my sister's house and she is grabbing portraits off the wall. You know how people do their family albums along the walls of the stairs and stuff like. She's grabbing pictures off the wall. And her eyes are all bugged out, super dilated. She's in shock. She's grabbing pictures off the wall and has this stack of glass frame pictures. And I was like, can you just grab the hard drives that the pictures are stored on?
Yeah.
And it was like, bing, like totally instantly, like, oh, I get it. There's like, I could grab my computer instead, but if you practice this just a little bit ahead of time, like one time, just give yourself, turn on a timer, because a timer imitates and mimics. It'll cause you to get a little bit antsy and excited. It'll get your heart rate up. It'll give you a little bit of an adrenaline dump. If you set a timer on and say, give yourself 15 minutes to get out of your house, and you're never coming back. Just try that one time and watch what happens. Like, I used to do drills with my wife where we would load up our vehicle. We had a Toyota 4Runner and we would load it up with like our Bugout bags. And then I had tiered systems of like, this is the equipment that we want to bring at different priority levels, depending on how much time I have to move my family. So that could be a basic kit that was on my person, or basic, a bigger Bugout bag. Like, my wife worked in the healthcare industry at the time. And what happened is, down at Good Samaritan Hospital, they started doing this partnership with the National Guard for lockdowns. Okay. And this is many years before anything was manifested that we've seen in our life and experience. But they started doing all of these drills involving the military to come in and land on their helipad with what are called ME6s, or like these little birds, like special forces, to come in and go ahead and secure the facility, because every nursing staff, doctor, medical response individual, they were an asset for the state. They literally would turn them into an asset for the state, and they were not allowed to leave the building, and they could be sequestered, locked up inside that facility. But they presented it as, we're doing this beautiful training so that we can handle an emergency situation. But if you read the fine print, what they were literally saying is their job is to be here to secure them in the building, to make sure they don't get out, to make sure that they don't leave, that they're going to go on these 24-hour shifts, and they're going to have rotation, and you're going to be sleeping in cots. And my wife and I began to game plan and strategize. Well, how do you get out of a situation like that? Do you have a change of clothes to get in and out of the building without looking like your normal self? Do you have a way of getting on a map system so you're not touching your car again and you're going to have to walk your way out of there? Do you know how to navigate alongside train tracks or other ways of going across roads that doesn't require you to go over the road? Like, you can make this a game and have fun doing it when it's a non-life threatening situation in emergency. The time when not to be trying to figure out and engineer your way out of this box that you're trapped in is when it's already taking place. It requires sometimes a little diligence and disciplines. Like, when you tell me, David, you're walking 6 miles a day, this puts you so many standards of deviation above the normal person at your age. Just to be super transparent, the vast majority of people that are out of their 40s and 50s in any level of it are not touching their physical body stamina, endurance, strength. They have no idea what they're capable of.
Couch potatoes. That's all they are.
By design, by design. But a few generations back, or even just one generation back, it was a completely different interaction. Like, my daughter and I were hanging out at the store, and this guy walked up to us, and we were talking to him. He's from Ukraine, and he was 68 years old. And I tell you, he honestly did not look a day over 50. He was not fit, but he was sharp and attentive, and he was so healthy. He was so healthy, and he was a passionate person about going outside and walking. That was like his deal. He just went outside and walked, and it gave him his life back. And I try to encourage people to have fun with this, like survival and trying to prepare for these scenarios. There's a lot of negativity that you got to wade through. There's a lot of dark realities that are out there about the people that are in positions of power. We have cultivated a society of psychopaths, those that are willing to do whatever it takes in order to have power because they were denied it at some critical phase in their life. They are willing to go ahead and do anything it takes. What was that?
Probably a kid. They were denied it when they were a kid, and they had temper tantrums, and then now they're going to go after people,
Yeah, and some of them had absolutely horrific growing up experiences like I
That's
did. Some
true.
of them had a structured, designed, orchestrated evil done to them on a repeated basis and shattered their ability to be able to fight back until they finally got somewhere in life where they were able to. And you know what? What happens is psychopaths go along with something called mutually assured destruction, where we literally are going to have enough blackmail and control on each other that we're going to go along to get along as long as we can, as long as we have to. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they've created a society. This is why we can't break free from a lot of these confines that have been put on us in so many arenas of our life, whether it is our food, our water, our medicine, our clothing, whether it's our politics, whether it's our judiciary system or the military. It's because we have a culture, a death cult at the top of it, a bunch of people that are really committed to only looking out for their better interests at the expense of all others. And so you have to learn to navigate through a society that is run by monsters. And you know what? You need to take some time and be deliberate with your actions and intentions to go ahead and train yourself ahead of time. If you have a firearm, deliberately, consistently try to train with it. If you don't plan on using it when the time matters, when you need to, because you won't. You genuinely will revert back to this level. I have taken guns out of people's hands that were scared. They could have shot me, they could have killed me, but they didn't have a category for someone coming at them and putting a knife to them that fast. They never thought it was possible. And as soon as you disarm somebody from their cognitive pretexts of what society should be like, you're the one controlling their perceptions. You're the one who's taking direct action when they're not. And it allows you to sweep through a society so rapidly when they're in that trauma state and take prisoners. And this is what's happened to our society. They put us in these trauma states. They have drowned us with so much learned helplessness that we think we just have to go along with the version of life that they've sold us. Like that you have to buy into the American dream. That American dream only works when you're asleep. But when you take direct, intentional, like self-sufficiency, like you have a duty to take care of yourself as much as it is possible to you, and nobody else is responsible for that. You should not be dependent on somebody else coming to rescue you, to help you, to
Right.
get you out of this pit that you're stuck in. You know what? You need to be the one who gets up off your stinking rear end and gets into the world. Like get out there, get going, get moving, do something, find a way to motivate yourself. And for me and my family, it literally took this world burning down all around us, people coming after my wife and I, hunting us down, trying to murder us before I was willing to absolutely do whatever it takes to get us out of this situation. And you know what? Because of that, it's opened my eyes to cultures and people. And I have learned there's so many marvelous people out there, way more than the psychopaths, y'all. There's wonderful, incredible, loving people who would lay down their life for you and give up their life for you. But you know what? They're most often not found in the confines of a city, because a city is designed to create frustration. It's designed to create that learned helplessness. But you know what? Scattered in and amongst them, there's a lot of people that genuinely want to raise their families in health, in peace, and in serenity, and they want to experience a good life. And because of that, we have an opportunity when we do go out of our houses to get to know our neighbors, to get to know them now when it's not the first time my sister was meeting that neighbor shouldn't have been right then when we're trying to load stuff into their vehicle because they're fleeing for their lives. If we had done these kinds of build these relationships a little bit ahead of times, what happens is we can unite together during those circumstances and overcome them. There's a lot of incredible people that lived during those calamities, like what happened in Maui, or during these calamities, like what happened in Colorado, because people laid down their lives for their neighbors ahead of time. And by doing that, man, I tell you what, some of these experiences, it's one of the best things to go through is a fiery trial in that regard. And you get to see some of the absolute best of people that you would have never expected. And so I hope you guys are finding ways to do that. And thank you guys. I so appreciate every chance I get to come on here.
No, we
David, you and
appreciate you. We really do, Nathan. I mean, people really do need to be prepared, and they don't think about that. And we appreciate the fact that you're giving our viewers a heads up. It's very important. Please visit his website, snatchedfromtheflames.com. Nathan, we'll talk to you again next time. Can't wait. Appreciate
looking
it.
forward to it.
All right.